Well, hello again. It's another podcast episode. We have 167 days until the midterm election. And on this episode, Kurt and I are going to tackle everything from monkeypox, that's the new biggie, monkeypox to replacement theory, and everything in between on this episode of Dale Carter's America.
From the heart of flyover country, he's not on the far right, and he's certainly not on the far left. Like you, he's somewhere in the middle. This is Dale Carter's America.
You may have noticed that I'm wearing a Chiefs hoodie, and this is the Military Appreciation Chiefs hoodie. This is our last podcast before Memorial Day.
That's right.
And this one means a lot to me because the patch that you can't see because you get this side, I can't really turn all the way over.
That's your good side anyway.
It's my good side. Is from the USS Kansas City. The year it was launched, that ship. This was the hoodie that the Chiefs had, so it means a lot to me. So Memorial Day coming up, and I always feel like I have to explain the difference between Memorial Day and Veterans Day because a lot of people get those, they use them interchangeably, and that's not true.
Yeah, that's correct.
You know the difference, right?
Yeah. Well, Memorial Day is for those who have lost their lives.
Right.
Veterans Day is broadly for military
all
veterans.
Military,
Yeah.
right. Veterans, active duty as well. We thank our military, but especially on Memorial Day, we remember those who made the ultimate sacrifice and the Gold Star families that were left behind. They will always have a place in our heart, no matter who's running the country, right? We're still Americans.
Absolutely,
Yeah.
absolutely. And I certainly have a lot more respect for those people who are serving and actually out there doing the thing than I do for our leadership. So.
Yeah. Well, speaking of that, let's jump right into this because we have the right track, wrong track survey. And now it's up to 80% who think we're on the wrong track. A lot of Democrats in that number. My question is, who are the 20% who think everything's going great?
Hey, they got their head in the sand, I guess.
They got something in the sand. And I wanted to contrast what we have in our country with a president and a bicameral legislature and a judiciary with how they handle things in Britain and Israel, two countries for sure that do it this way. There may be others. They have a prime minister and a legislative body. And at a time like this, if this were going on in Britain or Israel, they would call a no confidence vote.
Yeah.
And the no confidence vote would definitely go against the Biden administration. You'd have special elections immediately. We wouldn't have to wait 167 days and hope to God our country can weather this. You'd get a special election and things would be done immediately.
Yeah, but I don't even know if it's necessarily like a procedural thing because in this country, regardless of what the procedure is, you have all of the major government institutions that are more or less on the same page. So, I don't think that if we did things differently procedurally, that all of a sudden, the House is gonna vote to, change the president or whatever. Everyone's kind of on the same page and pushing the same agenda for the most part.
Well, but in those countries, what you would have with a no confidence vote is you'd get a prime minister / president of the other party immediately.
Right.
You'd get a change in government immediately, which we wouldn't get in this country, even with the midterm, to your point. But at least in 167 days and in January, when that new Congress is sworn in, you're going to be able to put the brakes on anything new coming out of the Biden White House.
Yeah, hopefully. We'll see.
Moving on to Chicago, curfews for minors. Lori Lightfoot, this is her great way to, fix what's going on in Chicago. She moved the minor curfew from 11 p.m. to 10 p.m. And then she had a press conference and said, I don't know what more I can do.
Yeah. Nice.
What more can she do? Let's see, Kurt. You should know. What more can she do?
Well, she actually, to further that, she had a tweet that she put up about it that she, I think, deleted because, it's bad optics to acknowledge the major problem that's happening. But, oh, man, crackdown on crime, maybe. That would be a good start.
and keep the criminals in jail longer than, an hour.
Yeah.
Because the cops, we're going through the same thing in Kansas City. It's like a turnstile. They're just right back out on the street again. Mm-hmm. And then on top of all of this, there's a lot more Lori Lightfoot could do. We could agree on that, right?
Yeah.
The governor of Illinois signed the nation's first legislation banning ghost guns. Mm. So ghost guns are now illegal. Mm. And as you know, Kurt, criminals scan for new legislation.
right,
so that they can obey the law.
right. And they're also, I mean, I don't know if you knew this or not, but every criminal in Chicago is following the laws on the books for guns to the T. They're following every single law. They make sure they keep up to date with it. So this law is really going to make a big difference, and we're here at Dale Carter's America very glad that they passed it.
All right. Closer to home, KCK, and this is from about a week ago I saw this story, on track to set a homicide record in KCK. The Metro, with all of the counties involved, as of Sunday, had 107 homicides, and we're not even to Memorial Day yet. Yeah. So just to make it easier, our friends over at 41 Action News, KSHB, they have on their website a homicide tracker. It lets you know how many and where they're happening. Now, where do you think most of the little blue dots in the homicide tracker have happened out of these 107 in Kansas City?
This is just KCK, or this is all Kansas City?
The whole metro.
Probably in the hood.
Yeah. Let me draw you kind of like a visual diagram. Those folks in Kansas City will be able to follow along. Basically, most of the blue dots are in an area that's bordered by I-70 on the north, I-435 on the east, Martin Luther King Jr. Boulevard, Swope Parkway, Blue Parkway, whatever you want to call it, and let's just say Main Street.
Paseo.
Yeah, Paseo, somewhere in that area. Yeah, basically that's where they're. So basically you get the leadership that you vote for.
Yeah.
And the leaders in those areas were the defund the police type. They're the ones that are running the areas with the most homicides.
Yeah, and nothing's being done about it. I mean, at the end of the day, you know that I'm a big advocate of changing the culture, you know, and politics is downstream of culture and all that kind of stuff. And we just need to start holding people accountable and holding communities accountable for their own actions. And this whole, you know, pushing off blame on the police or on systemic racism or on blah, 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 it's just not making a difference. It's probably making the problem worse. And for those people that are in those communities that actually are the victims of this violent crime, they want to see something change too.
They absolutely
You know,
do.
it's easy for you know, white upper middle class suburbanites to wax philosophical about systemic racism and all this stuff, but they're not the ones who actually have to deal with, you know, gunshots in the middle of the night and bullet holes coming through their bedroom, you know, and stuff like that. And so there needs to be some real change, and people need to start being held accountable for their actions.
Well, it's probably politically incorrect for me to say this, but in communities like Blue Springs, where we vote for our leaders, they wouldn't tolerate this.
Yeah.
They would crack down like you've never seen. There wouldn't be this mamby-pamby, well, I don't know, we want to be politically correct. You know, if somebody commits a crime, they go to jail.
Yeah. Well, that's just white folks out in Blue Springs.
I know.
As our mayor said.
Yeah. And speaking of the mayor, it's almost like you've read my mind because we're going there next. The Kansas Supreme Court. Now, Kansas would be the state that borders Missouri.
That's correct.
That borders the city of Kansas City, Missouri. Some folks get confused about that.
Yeah.
I've lived here for 27 years, and I live in Blue Springs, Missouri. And my brother, to this day, who's about a year and a half younger than me, he calls me and he says, "How are things in Kansas?"
Yeah, I get that all the time.
I'm like, well, I've lived in Missouri for 27 years. I do go to Kansas occasionally,
right?
But usually I'm in Missouri. So the Kansas Supreme Court upheld the Kansas legislature's redistricting plan. Now, did you follow all that?
A little bit. I mean, I saw some headlines and read, you know, the top paragraph or whatever, but not too much.
Okay, so for folks who may want to go all the way back to the beginning, a podcast lets us do that.
Yeah.
The Constitution of the United States calls for a census every 10 years.
Right.
Based on that census, the state legislatures of the states vote for a district map. Now, gerrymandering has been a term that's been around forever since Eldridge Gerry was the person who was named after, because the district he constructed was so obtuse that it was like, grab this guy over here and this guy over here. That's where gerrymandering came in. But they all do it.
Right.
Okay? And most of the 50 states lean heavily one way or the other. Democrat control in California and New York, Republican control in Kansas and Missouri, for instance. So they lean one way or the other. So when the Kansas legislature came forth with this, they only have one Democratic representative in Congress.
Wow.
And that is 3rd District Congressperson Sharice Davids.
Right,
okay?
right.
Yeah. So
you mean in the National Congress?
in the National Congress, in the U.S. House of Representatives. So the redistricting map changes that 3rd district probably just enough to screw her out of that seat. If what's happening in America wasn't going to turn that one back to red, the redistricting map probably does that. So the governor vetoed it. She's a Democrat. And the legislature overrode her veto. And then I think it was a Wyandotte County court got involved, a judge, a Democrat got involved and threw it out. So it went all the way to the Kansas Supreme Court, which leans to the left.
Yeah.
But they said, this is what the Constitution says, and so the redistricting map continues. So His Highness, the Pharaoh, Quentin Lucas I of Kansas City, Missouri, weighed in on this and said this is just very disappointing. He had a tweet that's since been taken down, but trust me, enough people know about this now that he even owns up to it if you reach out to him on Twitter. But he said in his perfect world that the Kansas City Metro would be its own city-state.
Right. I saw that, yeah.
City-state.
Yeah.
And presumably, the Pharaoh would be running it.
Yeah, is that like Liberia or Lesotho or something like that? That country that's in the middle of South Africa?
Yeah.
I think it's called Lesotho.
Is that what it's called?
I think so, yeah. So we're going to have our own little, our own our own city-state in the middle of the country. Yeah.
That's the mayor of Kansas City, Missouri, with him presumably running the new city-state of Kansas City. And people in Kansas are like, man, you can't even get Kansas City, Missouri right.
Right.
Stay the hell out of our state.
Yeah, well, the people in Blue Springs were saying the same thing when he was inserting himself into the whole Ray's Cafe mask mandate situation.
Which we covered very well on Dale Carter's America.
We did. Go watch the video. I went out and interviewed a bunch of people. It was a great time. But yeah, I mean, it's not just Quentin Lucas. I mean, politicians across the whole country are doing this. Eric Adams in New York is doing this. Obviously, Lori Lightfoot in Chicago is doing this.
Yeah.
She's going to California and whatever and posing, for pictures in the library, reading books, with her mask on or whatever weird stuff. And but he needs to focus on Kansas City, Missouri, his actual jurisdiction first.
His job. Yeah. Why don't you do your job,
right,
Mr. Mayor? And can we just be truthful about all this? Because when I started this podcast, the first principle of it is we want to tell the truth, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
So let's tell the truth. In states with Republican majorities every 10 years, the Republicans are going to do everything they can to screw Democrats. And in California and New York and places where the Democrats hold sway, they're going to do everything in their power to screw the Republicans. And it's all legal.
Yeah.
The Constitution gives those state legislatures that authority. So, Quentin Lucas, stop whining about what Kansas did. And Republicans, if you are, stop whining about what they're doing in Hawaii and California and New York and Connecticut and other similar blue states, because it happens.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I think there's not necessarily anything wrong with taking issue with the way that things are redistricted or whatever, but you're right. I mean, that is the constitutional process, and it does happen on both sides. You see a lot of positioning from particularly, I think, like left-wing media sources where they're using gerrymandering as this kind of scare term, it's like only Republicans are doing it, which is just not the truth. I mean, they're obviously ignoring all the cases, like you pointed out, of Democrats doing the very same thing.
They're both doing it.
Yeah, everyone's doing it.
Yeah. So grow up. Channeled me being a dad again.
Yeah, right?
That alpha voice is still there.
I feel scolded right now.
Grow up and move out. Have I ever said that before? Probably have. All right. California's first ever Native American federal judge has been approved by the Senate, which brings me to a question, and I know we brought it up last time too, but just seeing that there has to be an office somewhere in the West Wing. Maybe it's down in the basement where they've got like this big scoreboard up. And it's like, okay, we got this job opening. What haven't we done yet? What historical first have we not done yet?
We need a furry. That's what we need.
What's a furry?
You don't know what a furry is? It's probably better
I don't.
that you don't.
I don't.
It's probably better
Is that like a bear? I think I know what that is.
You can look it up. You can look
up a furry.
Yes.
All righty then.
Not safe for work, potentially, but.
Okay. Don't ever say anything on this. It's going to get me fired.
Oh, no.
It's important. I've got 9.3 more years.
You've already talked about way worse things on the morning show, so don't worry about it.
Well, I was kind of wondering, have we had a little person yet?
Yeah, that's a good one. Yeah.
I think that's good. We need to think about this. We need to help the Biden administration because they care nothing about competence.
Yeah.
They really don't. They're all about being able to go on NPR or CNN or MSNBC and say, this is the first who's ever had this job.
Oh, I've got one. What about a baby? We could have a baby. It might, a baby might be just as competent as Kamala Harris, for example. So why not?
That's true. They don't like babies too much, though. We're going to get to that later in the podcast because they're big on abortion.
Yeah,
so
that's true.
Babies are way down.
Babies are out. Babies are not in right now. Yeah. So yeah,
little person.
Yeah,
yeah.
Or like maybe a really tall person, or maybe a differently abled person.
Yeah, and aren't there like a gazillion genders now?
Yeah.
When I was a kid and I took biology in school, you had male and female, but now there's like a gazillion genders. And if you don't get it right, you're going to get in trouble. That's coming up down the road as well. But, if we could give any advice to the West Wing, we're all about that. The administration that preached competence coming out of the chute, right? Mm-hmm. That was Joe Biden, his inaugural address. We did our first podcast on the day he was inaugurated, where he said, give me a chance. I'm all about competence. I'm not that crazy lunatic that was tweeting from the bathroom at all hours of the night. I'm the grown-up in the room.
Yeah.
And this is where we are now, where they preach competence. It's more about color of skin, sexual orientation, ethnic background, height, weight, eye color, furry, whatever the furry thing is you want me to look up. Am I going to be embarrassed when I look that up?
Maybe. I mean, I guess it depends on how much you identify with it. But no, yeah, I think you're right. I think little person is good, to use the politically correct term, not midget, which I like midget. It sounds better to me. It rolls off the tongue.
Dwarf, is that that's bad too?
Maybe, I don't know.
I mean,
well, dwarf is like a very specific term because it refers to dwarfism. So I think not all little people, not all midgets are dwarfs, if that makes sense. It's like a broader category.
But all dwarfs are little people.
Yes, that's correct.
All right. So, if you want to join in the conversation, we'd love to have you. If you have any other boxes that have been unchecked by the Biden administration, I think they're going to have a lot of openings.
Yeah.
I think after this midterm, the rats are going to leave the ship.
Yeah.
So he's going to have to fill a lot of positions coming up. So how can the folks reach us best?
Well, you can send us an email to dalecartersamerica@gmail.com. You can message us on Facebook. Make sure you follow us on Facebook and Twitter, and subscribe on YouTube and Spotify and all that. We haven't really been getting many comments on our YouTube videos, so maybe drop a comment on the YouTube video. That would be nice. But yeah, leave us, your top tier identity politics, unchecked boxes that need to be filled. And we'll get right on that. We have a direct line to the president, so we'll get right on that.
Yeah, we do. I actually know the phone number for the White House switchboard. I've called that before.
Yeah?
It's interesting, right?
What happens?
Well, they answer the phone.
Okay. And then what?
I remember this was back when George H.W. Bush was president, and it was a morning show bit, and I called the number. It's like, you could look it up. It's like an easy number. I'm just not coming up with it off the top of my head. But I called, and I got somebody in the West Wing, and I put him on the air. And I said, well, what do you think about this? What do you have to say about this? And the guy goes, are we on the air? And I'm like, yeah, we're live on the air. Take me off the air now.
Oh, wow.
All of a sudden, I felt like I was being audited. I may have been audited that year.
Yeah. Well, that was back in the HW days when people, still used phones and stuff. I would be surprised if they had a real person that would answer the phone today, but you never know.
All right. Well, speaking of what we just talked about, White House spokesperson Karine Jean-Pierre, whatever, however you say it. She definitely is somebody. We talked about her a little bit last week, but I'm telling you, I'm watching these White House briefings, and she is terrible.
Yeah.
She is abysmal. They'll ask her a question, and she doesn't make eye contact. She immediately goes down to, which play am I going to call here?
Right.
But she does check a lot of boxes. She's gay. She's black. She's French. There were 4. I couldn't figure out what the fourth one is.
She's the first gay, black, immigrant. She's not a little person, so.
They've had women in that role before, so she wouldn't be a first there.
Damn.
But she said she checked 4 boxes, and I couldn't figure out what they were.
Yeah.
I got gay, black, and French, which is almost on the way to a bingo again.
Yeah.
So I just thought this was funny because Pete Ducey, is it Peter Ducey from Fox?
Yeah.
I love that guy.
Yeah, he's not even really like that. He's not even really pushing back that much, but he's just like the only person in the room that's asking real questions. So he's become this hero to the conservatives, and he's like, fine, I guess. But you would think that in a real media, there would be all Peter Ducey's in there, asking tough questions or asking follow-up questions, but he's the only guy. So
Peter reminds me of Sam Donaldson. Sam didn't give a shit who you were. I mean, Republican, Democrat, he was there to stir the pot.
Right.
And I'd like to think Peter is doing that and would do that with a Republican president as well. But, he's like, what was the deal where he said, we've asked the Biden administration how they're going to fix inflation, and the answer that came back was raise taxes on billionaires.
Right.
Is there a disconnect there? I mean, is there... Because it's obviously play number 2 in my limited Democrat playbook. You know, somebody has something that you don't, and that's not fair. You got to say, not fair.
Yes.
But how does that fix inflation?
Well, we haven't gotten an answer yet. So, I mean, we talked about this briefly last week, but he asked the question.
The president's Twitter account posted the other day, you want to bring down inflation, let's make sure the wealthiest corporations pay their fair share. Mm-hmm. How does raising taxes on corporations reduce inflation?
So are you talking about a specific tweet?
He tweeted, you want to bring down inflation, let's make sure the wealthiest corporations pay their fair share.
Look, we have talked about this past year about making sure that the wealthiest among us are paying their fair share. And that is important to do, and that is something that the president has been working on every day when we talk about inflation and lowering costs. And so it's very important that as we're seeing costs rise, as we're talking about how to build a America that's safe, that's equal for everyone, and doesn't leave everyone behind. That is an important part of that as well.
But how does raising taxes on corporations lower the cost of gas, the cost of a used car, the cost of food for everyday Americans?
So look, I think we encourage those who have done very well, right? Especially those who care about climate change, to support a fair tax code that doesn't charge manufacturers, workers, cops, builders a higher percentage of their earnings, that the most fortunate people in our nation, and not let that stand in the way of reducing energy costs and fighting this existential problem, if you think about that as an example.
Miss Jean Pierre's answer was, well, we need to raise taxes on the rich. So I guess that's the answer.
It doesn't, and it gets me back to just the paradigm shift that I've been saying since we began this podcast, and I believed it in my heart. In fact, I had Chris Matthews on my show on KFKF years ago.
Really?
He was promoting a book.
Chris Matthews.
Yeah, and the thrill up his leg and all that. That's that guy. And I said, look, you and I aren't going to agree on a lot, but can we agree that the government has gotten so bloated and so complicated that we just need to reboot it like a computer? I mean, it needs to be rebooted. And the paradigm shift I would recommend is, okay, we have this government. Here's what it needs to do. What's the fairest way to pay for it? Mm-hmm. Not try and use the government to socially re-engineer the country.
Yeah.
As Bernie Sanders would have, that there's going to be a whole, probably more than 50% of the country that will be handheld from cradle to grave by a benevolent government. That's not how the United States was constructed.
Yeah, I mean, the key thing that you said there is the first part. What does the government actually need to do? I mean,
what does it need to do?
That is where we're going off the rails. And we just approved last week $40 billion more dollars to Ukraine. Nobody's asking, who is this money going to?
Some people are.
What is it?
Rand Paul asked that question.
But, it's really concerning to me, not to get too off track, but, just to address the issue of government spending and of sort of government corruption or whatever you want to call it. I mean, people that we have praised in the past and have respect for, and generally have respect in the conservative movement, people like Ted Cruz, for example, voted for the spending for Ukraine. So it's like, the swamp, as they call it, it kind of corrupts people, even the people that we think are doing it for the right reasons and fighting for the right causes, eventually, they start doing things that are questionable.
K Street Republicans is what we call them, because that's where all the lobbyists are, K Street in Washington, D.C., and they get corrupted easily. Okay, so the White House spokesperson, she had another one too, when it was announced they were pausing the disinformation board. Now, we've had a lot of fun with the person who was appointed to lead it because of her fun music videos that she's put out, right?
Yeah.
Well, the White House spokesperson says that board is now paused. But the work goes on.
The work goes on. Yeah.
How do you pause something that nobody wanted in the first place and then say that the work goes on?
Well, my favorite part about it is that they say the reason that it was paused is because of disinformation about the disinformation board. So it's like, wait a second. You must be really bad at stopping disinformation then, because the first bit of disinformation about the disinformation board, and it's all shut down. You can't handle it.
Well, if she were there, and perhaps the work is continuing on it, and we can get more answers about monkeypox.
Yeah.
Because monkeypox is the new thing. And I am reading, I don't know if you've seen this, that the outbreak, because monkeypox is something that is prevalent in Africa, I guess. Mm-hmm. And they've dealt with it for a long time in Africa. Very rare for it to escape the African continent. But there was allegedly some sex rave somewhere in Europe. Mm-hmm. And that's where this outbreak has been traced to. So if we had the disinformation board, we could plug that in, right? It's like, here's what we're hearing.
Right.
Tell us, oh, wise Democrats who run our country, is that real? Or
Tell us about the sex party in Europe.
Is it disinformation?
Tell us the truth about this sex party. We need to know. Because maybe it was furries, actually. So that's possible.
Another reference to furries, which I'm going to have to look up. You are really embarrassing me today that I don't know what this is. But maybe the disinformation board could clear all that up.
It'll clear it all up. Yeah. No issue there.
Nothing Orwellian about that. 3 middle schoolers in Wisconsin are in trouble for refusing to use they/them pronouns when describing a fellow student. They are being investigated for bullying. Because whatever this student is, they needed to be using they and them instead of he or she. I don't even know if it's a boy or a girl.
Homeschool your kids, people. Homeschool your kids.
And that's Wisconsin.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't really think of Wisconsin as like, left-wing lunatics.
Yeah, well, isn't that where Ilhan Omar is from? Or is that Minnesota?
She's Michigan. I think she
Michigan
might be
or Minnesota. I don't know.
It's one of those states that starts with M, and it's not Missouri, I
get them confused. I'm sorry, people listening from Michigan and Minnesota and Wisconsin. We love you here, but I get your states confused. I just do. I'm sorry.
And, we haven't mentioned Bob Watson yet. He's our favorite State Farm agent because he's right there in Blue Springs at 7th and Main. He's been taking care of folks for damn near 50 years, right?
That's right.
The face that you put with whatever is going on in your world. Your car crashes, your house catches on fire, you get a flood in the basement or whatever. Bob Watson is your guy, and I feel strongly about that because he's my guy, right? And they have surprisingly great rates at State Farm, but what they don't have at State Farm are the LGBTQ children's book program that was supposed to happen at State Farm agents. Did you know those?
No, what happened?
This was down in Florida. It was a pilot program, and the agents pushed back. State Farm has abandoned its program to distribute LGBTQ-themed books to teachers, community centers, and libraries, explicitly targeting children as young as 5, after a media expose on a whistleblower email caught the company by surprise on Monday. Now, this was a pilot program they were going to start down in Florida. Why in the world do they want to start a program like this down in Florida?
That's a good question. I mean, the first question that I have is, what does the State Farm Insurance Company have to do with teaching?
I have no idea. Maybe
like,
Bob Watson could dig into the weeds on this and let us know.
God.
The original program was supposed to recruit hundreds of agents and staff volunteers to help diversify classrooms, community centers, and library bookshelves with a collection of books to help bring clarity and understanding to the national conversation about being transgender, inclusive, and non-binary.
Yeah, I mean, this whole idea, the left will push back on the conservative arguments against CRT in the schools or against sexualization of children in the schools. Oh, it's not happening. Oh, you can't point to any examples of that. There's endless examples of this. Endless examples of teachers and, other companies and other things like State Farm, didn't do it, but Disney, lots of places that are actively pushing for this in the schools. And it's just willful ignorance to not see this happening. I mean, it's blatantly out there in the open for everyone to see.
Well, they're pushing their agenda, and they're basically telling parents, and as a parent of 4, grandparent of 4 more, I'm very offended by this, that you have no role in this.
Yeah.
The state will dictate all of this with helpful partners like State Farm Insurance, which they are not doing it now. But here's a little example for you. In the book Nonbinary, one of the 3-book bundle offered in the Gender Cool collection, a character named Gia is introduced to young readers as a transgender girl who uses she, her pronouns. Quote from the book, "When you're born, a doctor," and this 5-year-olds they want to push this to. "When you're born, a doctor looks at you and says, it's a boy or it's a girl based on your body. But gender isn't that simple. You see, when I was born, the doctor said, it's a boy. But this wasn't true," Gia narrates. Now, my granddaughter is, now she's a little older than that, but they're all in that, I mean, she's in the 1st grade.
Right.
I don't want her dealing with stuff like this.
Yeah, can you imagine? Can you imagine having to unindoctrinate your 5-year-old kid because they go to school, they're being read this by their teacher. The school has a policy where you as the parent are not allowed to know that they're teaching this to your kid. You're purposely left out of the equation. Your kid comes home, what does this mean? What does that mean? I don't know if I'm a boy or a girl now. And then you have to unteach them that, and you have to bring them back to reality. I mean, it's unbelievable. They're getting younger and younger, and it's so clear the agenda now. I mean, like I said, homeschool your kids.
Yeah. Well, and maybe Bob Watson knows this guy, was sent by a guy named Jose Soto, S-O-T-O, State Farm's corporate responsibility analyst.
That was the whistleblower?
Yeah. Let's see.
Or that was the guy that was kind of pushing back on this?
That's the guy who's pushing it.
Yeah.
I don't know who the
see.
whistleblower is. But anyway, was sent to Florida agents, 6 of whom would have the opportunity to participate in the program. However, the email's language suggested a large and national scope. Nationwide, approximately 550 State Farm agents and employees will have the opportunity to donate this 3-book bundle to their local teacher, community center, or library of choice. I've known Bob Watson for a very long time. I cannot imagine him going into the library and saying, hey, I think you ought to give this to a 5-year-old.
Yeah, I can't
Bob,
imagine.
correct me if I'm wrong.
Well, yeah, I can't imagine that either. I haven't known him nearly as long as you have, but I don't think that's going to happen.
Well, I got to tell you, he's a great agent, and he's licensed in both Kansas and Missouri. And if you need surprisingly great rates from a face, I mean, you can go to any 800 number and get somebody who's not going to be there for you when the shit hits the fan.
Right.
That's probably not in his official commercials,
right.
But when the shit hits the fan, you need a guy like
That's
Bob
in the
Watson.
podcast commercial because we can say that on the podcast.
816-229-7878. 816-229-7878 for our favorite insurance agent. That would be Bob Watson. One more little newsy tidbit before we move on to abortion and replacement theory. Those are the two, burning issues right now. But I thought this was awesome. What did Joe Biden say when Georgia passed their election law? Do you remember?
Jim Eagle.
Yeah. It's like this is Jim Crow on steroids. It's like Jim Eagle, what they're trying to do down there.
And so I'm convinced that we'll be able to stop this because it is the most pernicious thing. This makes Jim Crow look like Jim Eagle. I mean, this is gigantic, what they're trying to do.
Okay. More Georgians went to the polls during the primary election early voting period than ever before. Ever before. Okay? In total, nearly 1 million Georgians cast their ballots ahead of Election Day. Nearly 93% of those were cast in person. The remaining 7% were absentee. Now, the Secretary of State down there says these numbers show a 168% increase in early voting turnout from the last gubernatorial primary in 2018, 212% increase from the last presidential primary in 2020. The Secretary of State down there says that he credits Georgia's new Election Integrity Act which many have called, including our president, an act of voter suppression. I mean, where are they going to go with this now? Because, I mean, Stacey Abrams was out in front on this, and they're all out in front on this, saying that it's Jim Crow on steroids, when in fact more Georgians went this route than ever before.
Yeah. I mean, I've said this before, and I'll say it again. The fact that it's too difficult to vote is what they're saying. It's just ridiculous. And if anything, it's too easy to vote, I would say. You know, maybe we need to look at, because we had all this stuff come out of COVID, and Georgia, you know, did have some integrity measures that they put in place, but maybe we need to look at that more and say, hey, do we really need all this early voting? Do we really need all this mail-in voting? There's a lot of potential for fraud there. There's a lot of potential for malfeasance, you know, so maybe we need to try and move back toward actually having an election day and just voting on election day. You know, if there's some extenuating circumstances, you know, you're out of town, or you're deployed overseas or something like that, that's a different story. But if we're talking about people who live in the community who are voting, they should be voting on election day, and we need to go back to that.
Well, in Missouri, you have 13 hours on election day to vote.
Yeah.
13 to go vote in your community right around the corner or whatever. So surely, I mean, I guess some people are working 15, 16 hours a day. I don't think everybody is.
Well, yeah, but also the other side of that, not only are the polls open for a really long time, but most employers, ours included, have a policy that allows you to leave work on election day for a certain number of time. Ours is, I think, 2 hours you can leave, 2 or 3 hours that you can leave to go vote.
Gosh, I didn't know that.
Yeah.
Maybe I'll skip out on part of the morning show.
Yeah.
I'm going to go vote. I need 2 hours.
Yeah.
7 to 9.
I'll cover for you. How about that? But and most employers have something like that. And I believe the reason is, you know, you can check me on this, but I believe that the reason that employers guarantee a certain amount of time for voting is that there are laws in a lot of states that actually guarantee that, where if your employer doesn't allow you to go vote, or you know, pushes back if you say, hey, I got to go vote, you know, during this time, and they push back and say, no, you have to stay and work, you can actually sue them. There are actually legal ramifications for that. So there are plenty of opportunities on election day for everyone to go vote. You know, we don't need all this extra stuff.
What do you think of the idea, like on a national election, like a presidential or a midterm election, of making that a federal holiday?
I'd be fine if we eliminate early voting and eliminate mail-in voting and make election day a federal holiday. That would be totally fine by me.
Yeah, we'll see. They'll continue to debate that. Before we get into the meat of the show here, we do want to mention, speaking of meat, pepperoni sausage on a pizza sounds really good at Funhouse Pizza right now.
Yeah, I love pepperoni.
Chase that with a really cold beer.
Oh, yeah.
I think I'm in on that. We are working, and Jim Dingman, if you are listening, we're reaching out to you. We are working on, we don't have a date specific yet, but we're targeting somewhere in June to bring all of the fans in from the podcast and do a live podcast. Do this, what we normally do, in front of an audience at Funhouse Pizza in Lee Summit.
Yeah, it'll be great. So instead of sneering at us from behind their keyboards, you know, people can come sneer at us in
Throw
person.
breadsticks at us? I like a good breadstick, and I can catch really well.
Yeah, I'll catch it.
Yeah.
Boom.
All right, so we're working on that. Just stay tuned for that. Date's coming. It'll be an early dinner hour because, you know me, I get up at 2 in the morning to do my real job, so I can't stay out too late on a school night. But Jim Dingman's Funhouse Pizza in Lee Summit on 50 Highway, in my adopted hometown of Blue Springs on 7 Highway. He was the first sponsor of the podcast, really. I mean, we had one through the radio station, but one that we went out and got.
Right.
Jim Dingman is our initial sponsor, so we really appreciate him being part of this.
Absolutely, absolutely. And we're looking forward to broadcasting there. Like Dale said, we're working on a date, but we're looking forward to broadcasting from Funhouse Pizza. We'll hopefully get to showcase the business a little bit, you know, maybe get some shots of around the business. We'll be eating pizza, I'm sure. Maybe we'll have Jim on, maybe we'll have Bob on, and it'll be a good time. So we're really looking forward to it. And they're still hiring at both locations, I believe, $13 an hour starting pay. So if you or someone you know out there are looking for a job in the Kansas City area, specifically on the Missouri side, this is a great opportunity to work for a great company and get some good experience.
Great summer job.
Yeah, absolutely.
Make some money this summer. Put your own gas in the car. God knows it's expensive enough. I can't imagine when my kids were driving, if gas prices were this high, if they came to me to hit me up for money to fill their tank.
Here's the bike.
Good luck to you. You got 2 big feet. Get out there and walk.
Right.
You get the sense I was a tough dad.
You got major dad vibes today. Got major dad vibes.
All right, so to abortion, that's one of the big issues we wanted to talk about. I thought we might have a decision by now. There is no decision yet. The court term goes through, I can't remember what the date is in June. Is it all the way through June?
I don't know.
Or is it the first Monday in June? I'm not sure. But this decision is hanging out there. They haven't come down with it yet. They may not come down with it at all. They may not have a decision.
Yeah.
So we'll see what happens. So the question becomes, what now? Depending on which media you're listening to, if you're watching MSNBC or CNN, there are two ways this is going to go because the Department of Justice has already said there's going to be violence.
Yeah.
Streets are going to run with blood this summer, right? So it's either right-wing riots or left-wing, mostly peaceful protests.
Yeah. Well, yeah. I mean, I don't think if they don't overturn Roe v. Wade, I don't think there's going to be massive, right-wing protests or violent riots or anything like that. It's just not what we do.
That's not exactly. That's not what happens. Now, of course, the left would say January 6th.
Right.
January 6th. We need hearings on that.
Right. Well, they can shove it. So
yeah. I mean, what I've said about that all along is that was a shameful day in American history, and the knuckleheads who did the worst on that ought to be going to jail.
Well, they are in jail. They're still in jail. They're in solitary confinement, awaiting their trial. They're receiving the same punishment that we give to foreign terrorists. It's ridiculous.
That's wrong.
It is wrong. It's crazy.
All right. So, and I made reference to this to you, the Janet Yellen interaction with Tim Scott from South Carolina. She was testifying before the Senate, and this is where white liberals come from. Mm-hmm. The limousine liberal crowd in Washington, D.C., this is where they come from. Janet Yellen actually said that abortion is good for the black economy, to which Tim Scott just went off.
Yeah.
Can we drop that clip here?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. If the draft of the court's majority holding in Roe versus Wade is the actual decision, what impact will the loss of abortion access mean economically for women?
Well, I believe that eliminating the right of women to make decisions about when and whether to have children would have very damaging effects on the economy and would set women back decades. Roe v. Wade and access to reproductive health care, including abortion, helped lead to increased labor force participation. It enabled many women to finish school. That increased their earning potential. It allowed women to plan and balance their families and careers. And research also shows that it had a favorable impact on the well-being and earnings of children.
To make it sound like it's just another 0.4% added to our labor force participation as a result of the issue of abortion, just to me seems harsh.
Well, I certainly don't mean to say what I think the effects are in a manner that's harsh. What we're talking about is whether or not women will have the ability to regulate their reproductive situation in ways that will enable them to plan lives that are fulfilling and satisfying for them. And one aspect of a satisfying life is being able to feel that you have the financial resources to raise a child, that the children you bring into the world are wanted, and that you have the ability to take care of them. In many cases, abortions are of teenage women, particularly low income and often black, who aren't in a position to be able to care for children, have unexpected pregnancies, and it deprives them of the ability often to continue their education, to later participate in the workforce. So there is a spillover into labor force participation, but it means that children will grow up in poverty and do worse themselves.
Thank you. Let me just.
I personally, because I'm a big Tim Scott fan, I part company with him on the lynching law, which I think is just, it's ridiculous in 2022 that we're even talking about that. I'm not a big fan of hate crimes. It's like if you did a crime, do the time. You don't get like bonus points because you were targeting this or targeting that. And I can't, have we had a lynching in the last how long?
No.
Yeah. So I part company with him on that. I think that was unnecessary. But I'm right there with him on being offended by Janet Yellen saying that abortion's good for the black economy.
Yeah. Well, you might look up Tim Scott's voting on the Ukraine spending as well, just saying. But yeah, I mean, it's obviously ridiculous. I mean, I've seen other people make this argument too that, oh, well, it's good for women because they can, go into the workforce and they can make more money and stimulate the economy. It's just totally missing the point. It's totally missing the point. You're ignoring the whole pro-choice argument is just ignoring half of the entire equation, which is that there's another human being here that we're not acknowledging. What about that human being? What about the baby who is being killed? What are they going to contribute to the economy when they're born and they grow up and they do whatever they want? Why are we not talking about that? It's just totally ignoring one half of the equation because women's empowerment and my body, my choice, and blah, blah, blah. It's all BS.
And I've said this before. I may have said this last week, but think about the greatest American that you know, the greatest contributor to America or science or pick whatever you want. Mm-hmm. And now imagine that baby had been aborted.
Yeah.
That's really the way you need to look at this, in my opinion. I mean, my opinion is that. Your opinion is that. The choice folks are going to be on the other side of that. And we're probably never going to see eye to eye if our noses were touching.
Yeah, it's a shame, and I have come across a few people that are at least willing to engage in the dialogue, and it hasn't been extremely productive, but at least they're open to hearing and listening and talking. But, most people on this issue are just like militantly
dead set where they are.
Yeah. But, I think that's true of both sides. I'm certainly set on pro-life. People are certainly set on pro-choice, but I think the difference is that you will see pro-life people who are willing to engage in the debate and willing to talk to people that disagree with them, whereas the pro-choice people, they're just like going absolutely apeshit crazy over this, and they don't want to talk to anybody. They just want to demonize you. They're just going out on the street and lighting dolls on fire or whatever the hell they're doing, and it's just it's really telling, as I've said before, it's really telling, I think, of where this movement is coming from. And it's some deeply troubling stuff. And I don't really understand it.
Well, let's be crystal clear again about this. If the court comes out and overturns Roe versus Wade, it does not mean that abortion is illegal in the United States. It sends it back to the states. And again, we were talking about that in terms of gerrymandering. You've got states that they all seem to lean one way or the other. There aren't a lot of 50-50 states and state legislatures. So you're going to either see a tightening of abortion laws, maybe abolition of abortion laws in some states, and some states are going to take it all the way to, we've talked about that, partial birth abortion.
Yeah, which is happening. It is happening. It has happened. You can look up, many examples of that. Most recently in D.C., there was a high-profile case of fully formed babies that were found in a box, basically. And all across the country, this is happening, and people are not talking about it. So it's just, again, I mean, do you want to know the truth? Are you curious about what's actually happening in the abortion industry? Mothers getting paid off to have late-term abortions, and they're poor, so they're getting $800, and it's a lot of money for them, so they go through with it, and all this kind of stuff.
I was handing hush money to women who we had left pieces of their baby. We had put these women's lives in jeopardy. We had put their lives at risk, and we were literally giving them a check for $800. And for a poor woman, $800 is a lot of money.
I mean, there have been so many moments in the last decade plus of going undercover in abortion clinics myself and seeing just heartbreaking things. Women vomiting in the hallway of an abortion clinic, crying out in pain. The late-term abortionist talking casually. about how they would literally leave a born alive baby to die. Or if you deliver the baby in the toilet, then you pick it up and stuff it in a plastic bag and bring it to us.
Babies are being born alive and the backs of their necks are being slit. They are being drowned. Their necks are being snapped. It's happening more often than people want to think about. These abortion facilities, these abortion providers, these doctors, they don't care about these women.
And you're realizing you're watching in front of your own eyes play out America's greatest horror story, which is how we butcher children.
It's just unbelievable. It's American genocide is what
you had mentioned to me Project Veritas. Is that a good place to bring them on board here?
Yeah, well, it's sort of a separate issue, but just I guess to switch to that then.
Well,
so
Veritas is truth in Latin.
Yeah, well, there you go. That's a good transition.
I don't know what a furry is, but I know what Veritas means.
Yeah, well, that's probably more important than the furry thing. So, but yeah, so Project Veritas, if you're not familiar, they are sort of a journalistic organization led by this guy James O'Keefe, and they do like undercover journalism. So they've broken a lot of big stories. They were one of the major people that broke the story, taking it back to abortion. This was several years ago, about the Planned Parenthood selling fetal baby parts, and all that kind of stuff. They broke the story about the ABC host, I believe it was, who said on a hot mic off the air that they were exaggerating the whole COVID thing and nobody really believed in it. Most recently, just this past week, they broke a story where they had undercover journalists, these girls basically, that came forward. They're wearing like hidden cameras on their clothes, and they're interviewing people from Twitter. And it's like high profile IT people, creative directors at Twitter, that kind of thing. And these guys are basically acknowledging what we all sort of inherently knew, which is that Twitter is biased against conservatives and right-wing sources, that people who work at Twitter, as one guy puts it, are basically all commies, and they're living in a bubble, and they're punishing free speech only on the right, and that it can't be possible to have a platform with both sides equally represented and stuff like that. I'll drop a clip here, but
yeah.
So do you think there's a difference between Twitter's definition of free speech and Elon's definition of free speech?
Twitter does not believe in free speech. Elon believes in free speech.
What do your colleagues say about it?
They hate it. Some of my colleagues are like super left. Our jobs are at stake. He's a capitalist. If we weren't really operating like capitalists more, we were very socialist. Like we're all like communist.
Or not believe in free speech?
Because Twitter wants to censor bullying and harassment. And the idea of free speech is that you can bully and harass people. And Twitter does not believe in this value as a platform, because it's not conducive to a business. If you want to run a business, like even Facebook or Instagram, they don't want people bullying and harassing, or even YouTube. They straight up, any toxic behavior, they're like, nope, we can't have it.
For example, like if you bully a transgender, if the right thinks it's okay, the left does not. Ideologically, it does not make sense, because we're actually censoring the right, not the left. Because everyone on the right wing will be like, bro, it's okay to say, just gotta tolerate it.
It's very interesting stuff.
Well, the truth matters, and it's why it's the number one principle for Dale Carter's America. Replacement theory is the final thing that I want to talk about today. And, the Democrats are clearly flailing in the wilderness here, trying to come up with some message to scare the hell out of enough people to get out and vote, because they've got nothing they can run on.
Yep.
It's a dumpster fire no matter which way you look. And I loved Whoopi Goldberg on The View. Was basically saying none of this is Joe's fault. It's like he's walking around in a room and he steps on that floorboard and it whacks him in the head. And he turns around and that floorboard whacks him in the head. But none of this is his fault. No, it's his fault. If you're the president, the buck stops with you. So the latest thing, because the ultra MAGA thing didn't work,
right.
It backfired on them. Because people like you and me are like, Damn
it
right.
backfired hard. Go check out our new profile picture on the Facebook page.
Damn
it
right.
backfired.
That's got to be from The Boys, right?
Yeah.
That's one of my favorite shows.
Oh no, I just made that myself.
Okay.
Yeah.
Because if you know what The Boys is,
I'm vaguely
on
familiar
Amazon
with it. Yeah,
it's
I haven't really watched
even
it.
superheroes have a bad day.
Right.
And the main character, he does that with his eyes. So I thought that's what you were doing.
Gotcha.
Okay. So the latest thing, because Ultra MAGA failed, MAGA King didn't stick because Trump would take that as a compliment.
Oh, yeah.
Okay. So now it's replacement theory. And this was espoused by the Buffalo shooter, who we do not identify with, completely wrong in what he did, just like every shooting in America, just like every black-on-black shooting that happens in Kansas City. They're all wrong. When you take a life, you are in the wrong, and the Buffalo shooter definitely in the wrong. But what's true and what's not about this whole replacement theory thing?
You're asking me?
Yeah, what do you think?
Well, it's one of those things where the Democrats are trying to create fear in order to motivate the voting, like you just talked about. And so they've been going around for the past several years talking about demographic change in America. They've been talking about bringing in immigrants. It's going to be good for Democrats. White people are going to be a majority. I mean, there's clips out there of very high profile, prominent liberal and Democrat figures in front of crowds, including like late night TV hosts like Stephen Colbert, talking about the declining white demographic rate. And the whole audience is like, yay, less white people, woohoo, So they're cheering it on.
And most of them are white, which is interesting.
They're cheering it on. They're celebrating it. They're cheering it on.
It seems harder and harder to ignore that the echoes of replacement theory and other racially motivated views are increasingly coming out into the open.
In a few years, we're going to be a majority brown country. White people will not be the majority in the country anymore.
This will be the first generation ever in American history in which whites will be a minority of the generation at some point.
As of 2007, every year, babies being born in this country, whites now are the minority.
In 2044, everyone is going to be a minority.
As the demographics change, as white people become the minority in the country, which is coming.
Demographics is destiny.
Demographics is destiny.
Demographics is destiny, right? The country is changing.
I've been saying it here. Other people have been saying it here for years now, even before Donald Trump. The demographics is destiny.
The white population is declining for the first time in history in America, while the number of multiracial Americans have more than doubled.
So we live in a country where the demographics are changing. It's becoming less white.
Correct.
Okay.
You'll be announcing that we're calling the 38 electoral votes of Texas for the Democratic nominee for president. It's changing. It's going to become a purple state and then a blue state because of the demographics, because of the population growth.
The growth in Texas has been almost entirely driven by non-white population growth, mostly by Hispanic and Latino population growth.
The idea that whites will not be the majority, I mean, it's an exciting transformation of the country. It's an exciting evolution and progress of our country in many different ways.
The white population is declining. It was always on the upswing. So that speaks to the beautiful diversity of America. It speaks to how that population the demographics will weigh in politically.
The results of the 2020 census just came out, and for the first time in American history, the number of white people went down.
Then you have people on the right reacting to that, like Tucker Carlson is the most high-profile one because he's talked about it on his show, and he'll say things like, well, why are these Democrats so gung-ho about less white people? Like, why is this a thing? Why are they pushing for this? Mm-hmm. And then the Democrats' response to that is, look, they're pushing conspiracy theories about demographic change. It's like, no, we're responding to what you're saying and doing openly, So this whole idea that it's this right-wing racist conspiracy theory about white people being a minority, it's just, first of all, it's just the truth. It is happening. Whether you agree with it or don't agree with it or are indifferent.
Of course it's happening.
It's happening.
Yeah.
It's obviously happening. And the left is promoting it and pushing it, and they're talking about it openly. So yeah, we're going to respond. We're going to point that out and say, hey, look at this. Isn't this interesting? What do we make of this? And that's what people, conservatives have been doing, not very much, but some conservatives have been talking about. And now because the shooter, mentioned it in his manifesto, and he talked about stuff that is not mainstream, right? That's what they're not saying. Like this manifesto, I've looked through it. I haven't read the whole thing, but he's talking about it's like the Jews that are controlling demographic change, and the Jews are trying to replace whites, and all this crazy
Here's
stuff.
an old
right?
story.
And so, I mean, that's not what Tucker Carlson's talking about. That's not what people are talking about. We're just pointing to the Democrats and what they're saying, and all of a sudden that's a conspiracy theory. It's ridiculous. And it just goes back to the same Democrat playbook that they've been using over and over again. But at the end of the day, what it really is, they're trying to instill fear in their voting base in order to motivate them to come out to the polls.
Because they've got nothing to sell.
And instead of pointing to like actual things that conservatives are doing in terms of policy or culture or whatever, they're pointing to the reaction. And you get this so much. It's not conservatives did this. It's conservatives pounce. They're, taking advantage of. They're responding to the reaction, not to the thing itself.
Yeah. Well, I think we need to have a rational immigration policy. I think a lot of people would agree with that. We've got 11 million jobs in this country that we cannot fill right now, but it needs to be reasonable. So what you're telling me is if you believe in a secure border, you believe in replacement theory. It's like if we have a secure border, we're saying we don't want, all of you people of color to come in here to our country.
I don't even know. I mean, it doesn't have anything to do with race per se. I mean, it can, depending on who you ask, but we need to have a secure border. That's just it. I mean, if you don't have a secure border, you're not a nation.
You don't have a country.
Yeah.
Exactly right. So if replacement theory were true, okay, let's say it were true, and that white people are terrified that people of color are about to take over, wouldn't Republicans and conservatives support abortion?
Yeah.
Since the black abortion rate is 4 times higher than the white rate?
That is such a great point, Dale. That is such a great point. And, it's very interesting because you will have people on the far left who I believe, it's sort of the soft bigotry of low expectations, which we've talked about. It's like this weird inherent racism where they just expect less of blacks. They inherently think that they're lower. It's like, these poor black people, they're going to be born into a poor family. They don't have the same shot as everyone else. So let's just kill them in the womb. That's what they're saying. And then the mainstream conservative position is no, like everyone has an equal opportunity. Everyone deserves life. Everyone deserves, a chance in this country, especially American citizens. And then you have the very far right, of which is a very, very small minority, of which like the Buffalo shooter would be included. I don't know what his position on this was, but which would be pro-abortion for demographic reasons because they don't want more blacks in this country. They want, the true like Jews control white replacement theory thing of which very few people believe. So you have the very far right and the mainstream left in total agreement on this issue because it leads to less black babies.
Wow. All right, so we'll continue that, and we'll see. I mean, I'm guessing, Kurt, by next week there will be a new, what's the cape that the matador holds or whatever?
Right.
There will be a new one of those coming from the Democrats.
The new current thing. There's a new current thing every week.
We're
Stay
watching
tuned.
the current thing, and we're reporting it to you on Dale Carter's America. I want to thank Bob Watson, our favorite State Farm agent, for being on board here. Hopefully, you'll get to meet Bob Watson at Funhouse Pizza when we take the show on the road next month. We're working on a date, and hopefully by next week, we'll be able to tell you what that date is so you can plan for it. So before we leave you, the formula shortage thing is still going on. And I thought of one family who it would impact more than most in this country, a couple in Louisiana. They are the parents of 3 pairs of twins, all born in the past 2 years. Woo-hoo-hoo. Courtney Spears and her husband Everett Jones say Eva and Cameron were born May 10th. Twin brothers Ethan and Curtis were born in 2020, and twin sisters Emery and Cassidy were born in 2021. And they have another child who is 5.
Wow.
Yeah. The latest twins are still in the NICU, but Spears says they're both doing well. Okay, so that's 2, 4, 6, 7 kids, 5 years of age and younger. So if, and they talk about Nancy Pelosi's not supposed to be getting communion because of her stance on abortion.
Right.
She's doing it anyway.
Right.
They haven't really said much about that. I don't think they ever will. But the Pope also does not believe in birth control, okay? But if there were ever a case for birth control, a vasectomy, hysterectomy, or for God's sake, get these people on the pill or send them some condoms. This is a case for birth control.
Yeah, but, I can't help but think with all of this stuff going on with abortion and indoctrination of kids and everything like that, there's a war on children in this country. There really is, on babies, on children in school, all the way up to adulthood. And it's honestly refreshing to me to see stories like this, that people are still having babies, that people are still making families, staying in stable relationships, having lots of kids, especially if they're, raising them in the proper way. That's what's going to save this country in the long term. So it's good to see. I mean, they have their hands full, certainly, but
point counterpoint, because I would say 7 is enough.
Yeah, right. Yeah, probably.
And for all of us, that's Dale Carter's America.
The views expressed on Dale Carter's America are Dale's and Kurt Wheeler's. They do not necessarily reflect the views of KFKF or Steel City Media. Comments can be sent to dalecartersamerica@gmail.com. Check back for weekly episodes. Subscribe, spread the word, and give us a 5-star review. Thanks for being a part of Dale Carter's America.